And wilderness seasons are just, they're these unique seasons that God can do deep works in our heart that just can't be done in other seasons. And, when it's all the busyness and all the things going on, we just don't focus on the Lord in the same way. And so these wilderness seasons are actually an invitation from the Lord to step into this deeper, more intimate relationship with him. And I think it's an important thing. Mark Buchanan calls it the holy wild. And it's this idea that it's this invitation into this holy space with God to do these deep works in our heart. I would just encourage you as we start diving in and the ladies start sharing, just to be asking your own heart these questions too. Like, what does it look like? What has it looked like in your life? What does it look like in your life when God calls you into these spaces and into these seasons? And just let him speak to you as we go. But let's get started with verse 14. So Hosea 2:14 says, "Therefore I am now going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her." So the first idea from this passage is that wilderness seasons are where God speaks tenderly. And I think right away the takeaway is that the Lord is leading us. He's alluring us. It's not him dragging us or forcing us or coercing us to come into these hard spaces, but it's actually this loving, intimate invitation to join him so that he can speak tenderly to us and fill the needs and the longings in our heart. And so I would love for you ladies to sort of speak to this. What has it looked like in your life for the Lord to allure you and to speak tenderly to your heart?
For myself, God has used this season of wilderness to communicate his heart to me in a way that I've never experienced in other seasons. Honestly, in my entire life, I have experienced and gotten to know the heart of God because of infertility in a way that I don't think anything else might present the same opportunity. And when I was pondering this question, the thing that kept coming up was the last few years I have learned, and I've been really given permission to bring to God all my raw questions and emotions. Sometimes I think we look at God because we might look at the church and we might think I have to bring my Sunday best, and he is a God that is not afraid of our very raw parts, the parts that are angry and not put together and just laid out on the floor in despair and mad. I have been so mad at God. And I have felt more freedom in the last few years through encouragement of other people to be God's not afraid of that. He can handle that, and he wants to meet you in that place. You don't have to just come to him with I don't always come to him I trust you, God. No, I'm actually really? We're here again? And I feel this is such a beautiful thing we want, and you designed us to procreate and have a family that follows you. What are you doing? I'm so over this. And he has drawn me into those places of despair with so just wide open arms. I know, come to me. I hear you and I see you, and I long to meet with you in that place. And Jesus, because he lived a completely human life, has experienced everything we have possibly felt. He has experienced dread, despair, betrayal, everything that I have walked, he has already gone before me. And that's what makes him a perfect friend. Jesus is a friend, and he is a friend like none other because he fully knows and understands what I have journeyed. And so because of that, I have experienced his gentleness. He's never said, you can't talk to me like that. He's I know, keep telling me what is going on in there. I want to know. He wants to hear from me. Even when it's the ugliest version of me, he's fully ready to receive it. And then if I have ears to hear, he wants to speak gently with me. And so that's how I've seen and experienced his tenderness, is just his friendship and his gentleness. He doesn't turn me away because I'm really angry, and I know that he can change our situation. He's met me in those places, and he's shown me his heart, and that's just, I think, a really beautiful thing. He's also offered me the gift of his presence, which is peace, and it's the ultimate peace, is just being with him. Even if I don't have our answer and I don't have what I want, like, he knows what I need is just more of him. And so, yeah.
Yeah, this has been a common theme that comes up, is this peace of God. And I was telling the girls, I read this quote, I think it was just this week or last week, and it's this idea that if you want peace that surpasses understanding, you have to give up your right to understand. And that's what I hear you saying, like, as you're trusting God's goodness in it, even if you're not getting what you want, or like understanding why he's doing it in his own timing, like, there's a peace that comes, but it's a peace that comes at the expense of us not demanding to understand why.
As Ashton was talking, I was thinking about a time when Chris and I were probably at, year 10, 12, 14. We were married 16 years before our girls came into our life, and that's a long time. It's a long time of hope deferred, and there's so much I could say about the Lord did for me really early on. I became a Christian at 13, was raised in a non-Christian, pretty chaotic home, and but the Lord in his goodness, I met him when I was a young teenager. And when I was about 19 years old, I finally just got really serious and said, I'm going to quit having one foot in each camp, and I'm going to be all in for Jesus. And one of the things that Lord did at that time was he just challenged me to give him 10 minutes a day. And I would encourage you with that. I would give you that challenge too, to give the Lord 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes a day of reading one passage of Scripture. 10 minutes a day of praying or journaling one thing of gratitude or listening to a worship song. 10 minutes. Think about the other things you do for 10 minutes, right? And so the Lord asked me for 10 minutes, and 10 minutes wasn't enough, and it kind of turned into 20 and 30 and 40. And by the time I was in my early 20s, if I didn't spend an hour alone with the Lord each day, it just wasn't enough. I just felt like it just wasn't enough. And what I love about that is I believe the Lord knew the journey that we were going to be on, and he was preparing me for that journey. He knew that I would need to know his character. He knew that I would need to know where to find encouragement. He knew that. And so the Lord did that in a time that I was not in a difficult place. I remember asking a pastor one time, what does it mean, like in Scripture it says, I bring the sacrifice of praise to the Lord. And I was like, I don't really get what that means, because I love to worship. And he said, oh, you just haven't lived long enough yet, sweetheart. And so all of us come into this place today. And yes, thanks to Hallmark or somebody, today is deemed Mother's Day, okay? As a mom now, I tell my kids, like, every day's Mother's Day. And so this day is set apart, and it's a day to honor the women in our lives and the mothers and things. But many of you in this room are not moms, or you're beyond childbearing years, or you're gentlemen, and so that doesn't apply to you. But I just want to promise you that what we're sharing up here, the way that the Lord has drawn us in, each of us, the way he's met us, it applies to every single person, every single gender and age and stage of life. And so I just encourage you to press in. And exactly like what Lindsay said, what is the Lord saying? How is he inviting you into that deeper place with him? And so, yeah, that would be.
Good. Yeah, I think for me, when I think of just a season of my life where I just experienced Jesus just drawing me into the wilderness so he could speak gently to me, I think of when I was pregnant for the second time, and at 12 weeks started having some complications and went in, and they found a large subchorionic hemorrhage, which they said had caused 50% of the placenta to erupt, which if you haven't experienced pregnancy might not make a lot of sense, but it's pretty important that that stays intact. So ultimately they told us that there was no way that the baby could survive. And it came at a season in my life where just a few months before, my cousin, who was a few years younger than me, we'd grown up together, spent all our summers together, was killed in a plane crash in their family's 2-seater plane. And I was still just like struggling to make sense of that and where God was in that. And it really just started this searching in my heart of how could God be good and where was he with me in the midst of this, and just this like deep feeling of aloneness. Not that I was alone, because there were so many people from our community that just like came and sat with me and like prayed over me, but just this like sense of aloneness of like walking through this and not knowing where God was. And I spent 5 months on bed rest. In the first few weeks of that, I just kind of in a desperate attempt to find hope began just like scouring the internet, like reading article after article, anything, forums, anything that I could find like relating to what the doctors had told me. And if you're looking for hope or peace, the internet, that's not a good place to find it. And it really just led to, just feeling more alone and more despair. And finally, my mom said to me one day in her motherly wisdom, something along the lines of, I think you need to begin to fill your mind with something else. And it was in that and not knowing where else to turn, and kind of from this place of desperation, that I began to just cry out to God and read his word in a different way than I had before. And I remember reading the Gospel of Mark and just story after story of Jesus walking the earth and just the compassion that he had on people as he encountered them, and miracle after miracle and healing that he did. And as I read those stories, I just felt him whispering to me that he was still the same God. And then I remember coming to the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And it was a story I'd honestly heard since I was a toddler, but something about reading it afresh, and I think it talks about scripture being living and breathing. Reading it afresh in that moment, like God spoke to me, and it just felt like he was saying, if I can feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish, I can certainly grow a baby with only half a placenta, despite what the doctors say. And not that he would, but that he could. And that was really the first time in that season that I felt peace and just experienced, I think, where scripture talks about a peace that transcends understanding, a peace the world cannot give, because like from a human understanding, it didn't make sense, because nothing in my circumstances had changed and nothing in my prognosis had changed. I was still on bed rest, still thought the baby, we were just waiting to lose the baby, but instead I just had this awareness of who God was and his presence with me, and that his power and love weren't shaped or defined by my circumstances or my feelings even.
Yeah.
I wanted to add to what Amy said there of, God could, but it didn't mean that he would. In her case, he did. But I remember many years into our journey being at a church service, and they were speaking out of Daniel 3, which is where the 3 young Jewish boys are told to bow down and worship King Nebuchadnezzar's statue, and they won't do it. And they say and he said, well, I'm going to throw you in the fiery furnace. And he says, in all due respect, Your Majesty, we believe that our God can rescue us. But even if he does not, still I will worship him. Mm-hmm. And that was a choice that I had to make in the middle of that journey. And it's a choice that Ashton has made over and over in her journey, and all of us actually. But still I will worship you. Rather you change my circumstances or not, I will find my refuge in you. I will, when I can't see your hand, I'll trust your heart. I'll trust that you are who you say you are. Mm. And I'm just grateful that God, Jesus says in this world you will have trouble. And I remember sitting with, I'm going to just add this, when I was sitting with a friend and sharing about, we were, 10 or so years into our journey, and she was just so sad for me. But she was walking through a divorce, and I was so sad for her. And then I have another friend who was diagnosed with cancer, and I was so sad for her in the midst of my own. So we all have different things, right? We have, in this world you will have trouble, but Jesus says, take heart, I have overcome the world. And so it's him. We were created for union with God, and that's the one that we need to cling to.
Yeah, and really, that's the perfect segue into verse 15, this idea of trouble, like that we will have trouble. Verse 15 says, "There I will give her back her vineyards and will make the valley of Achor a door of hope. There she will respond as in the days of her youth, as in the days she came up out of Egypt." God is a God of restoration and redemption, but we see in this passage, Achor actually is the same word for trouble. And so God is essentially promising us that he will take the valley of trouble and turn it into a door of hope. And I know, we're all so aware that there are a lot of you in this room that are in a valley of trouble right now, and you're not seeing the door of hope at this point. And I know that a lot of you are even in that valley of trouble that this weekend actually represents for you, whether that's infertility, whether it's the loss of your mom that still feels fresh, whether it's the loss of a child, even if it's just difficult relationships with a mom or a child. This weekend doesn't necessarily feel good. It feels like the valley of trouble. But I want to encourage you to lean into this promise that God will create a door of hope out of that trouble. So ladies, how has that looked like in your lives for God to take these doors or these valleys of trouble and turn them into doors of hope?
Yeah, hope has been such a journey of it feels like whiplash when you're trying to conceive, because you're literally in a cyclical place of hope and then let down and then hope and then let down, and it just carries on. And I've had to wrestle with hope a lot. I've wrestled with God in these rows, in these chairs during worship. I know what I'm singing and what's being sung is true, but it's not my reality right now. And I'm so tired of my heart getting crushed. And so hope is vulnerable in that way. And it's vulnerable especially when you feel hyper-fixated on what you're praying for. When that is the one thing that you might be living for, it is easy to lose sight of why a relationship with Jesus looks different than trouble for the rest of the world. I have hope because my hope is in Jesus. My relationship, my life is his, and whether I ever get pregnant or not, I have hope in his life, death, and resurrection, and that is what ultimately carries me. He has used other people to also instill hope in us, people that I've walked for 14, 15, 16 years, or friends that he has placed in my life at the perfect time that fully understand what we're going through, to bring hope and speak life and belief and faith into us that we might not have had. And this is why your story is so valuable, because someone might be desperate to hear why you have hope, and they might be desperate for the story of your victory. How did God bring you through that, and why should I have hope? People need to hear it, and so I just need you to know that your story matters, because someone else might really need it. And God has absolutely done that through friendship and people. He brought me to Lamentations, actually 2 passages, but Lamentations is literally a book of lamenting. And if you read through it, it's whoa, this is the pits of all pits. But chapter 3 says, "This I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end, and they're new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will have hope in him." It doesn't say you're going to get what you're praying for. It's just God's faithfulness is my hope. And that's our testimony up here. God's faithfulness is our testimony, not because we've always gotten what we want when we want it, but because we can have hope in him. And Romans 5 actually has this kind of beautiful portrayal of where there's glory in our sufferings produce perseverance, because you have long suffered, and so you've persevered through something, and that perseverance develops character in you, and that character produces hope, and that hope does not put us to shame. And so if you've waded waters of long suffering, God's actually using that to produce character in you. Like, he has moved in me in my life in ways that, again, like nothing else, like infertility, has developed character inside of me. And it's actually, when I zoom out and look at my life, I'm like, that's beautiful, the way that he is like refining me to be someone he's called me to be. And I can lose sight of that if I'm like just staying in depression, staying in despair. I might lose sight of how he wants to use me. And so part of the hope of my life is I want to partner with him in my suffering. God, how do you want to use me? I have life to live, and you have life to live even in your hardship. And he wants to use you if you're willing to partner with him. Ask him, like, God, what do you want to do with me in our story? How can I link arms with you and share the gospel and be the hands, feet, the light of Jesus in a very dark world? He wants to use your brokenness and your story for his glory if you'll let him. And that alone is hope for me. Like, I have purpose every single day to get up, even if our story hasn't quite yet unfolded in the way that I might hope for.
Yeah, I think going back to the story that I started to share earlier, and even that piece of the Lord is my portion and his mercies are new every morning, like just being able to experience that in that season and him speak to me through his word, and just knowing that the same God that was on his throne back when these words were written is still on his throne today, and he will still be on his throne forever. And like, that's where our hope lies. But then even, in the midst of it, our son Judah was born at 38 weeks, perfectly healthy. So I truly got to witness the miracle working power of God firsthand. Right after he was born, we were talking to the doctors, and they're like, yeah, we just can't explain it. And we're like, well, we can. And I think even just that we named him Judah, which means praise God, and being able to sit with others just facing different but scary situations, and just being able to share that hope and that miracle working power of God, I think, is one thing that he brought out of that season in my life. Another thing was just, he really taught me in that season to wait on him and just to cry out to him, that I could come to him with, kind of like she shared, like my raw emotions and all my questions and just like these honest feelings, and he takes that and he speaks into that, and he wants to carry that for us. And that practice of just waiting on him and seeking him has been something that's sustained me through so many seasons of my life. Mary shared earlier about that practice when she was young, like just preparing her heart for the next season. I think I've experienced that through that. And then even just reflecting back this past week, even the business that I have now was really born out of that season, and just another beautiful way, I think, that we have a God that brings beauty from ashes. And it was a few weeks before being put on bed rest that I had opened a little Etsy shop, and suddenly I had 5 months on bed rest with nothing to do besides create and design and just kind of pour into that I would never have had in another season of my life. And I just think it's so reflective of the heart of God, of just how he redeems and repurposes even the seasons and the time of our lives that feel so lost to us, and his goodness in that.
I think there's really a both and part of all of our journeys. And I'm the kind of person that likes to actually look on the bright side of things. And so even after we adopted our girls, I sort of set aside the grief that I had lived through all those years. And I just went, but look what God did. And one of the things I had to actually literally come to grips with in the last couple of years was like, you have all of this unresolved grief. Because what ended up happening is we walked that journey. I have a friend with 5 kids who said to me, you've had the longest labor and the shortest pregnancy. Because when we found out that we had a green light to adopt, it was like literally 2 weeks. And so it was like, all happened really quick. And then I had these precious little girls, and I was in mommy zone. And now my girls are 19 and 20, and it's like, wow, there's a lot that I didn't process there. There's a lot that I powered through. There's a lot that and so going back and saying, Lord, I want you to heal those wounds from all those years, some of which I just kind of ran past, so that you can repurpose that pain. But he can't repurpose it until we process it. And so even just being on a journey in the last couple of years of allowing the Lord to do that. Yeah, I think so there's not like a bow wrapped up at the end of it, like all's well that ends well kind of a thing. So yeah.
Yeah, you were sharing like, it's beautiful and like there's hope, but like the reality is there's still pain in the story. And that's okay for it to be both and.
It's both and,
like
yeah.
you're sharing.
A counselor friend of mine said to me, like, yes. And here's what I said. I didn't share this last night because my daughter was in the room, one of my girls. But I always felt like I cannot grieve what I didn't have because I felt like that was a disservice to my daughters. Like, I mean, look what God did. He gave us these 2 beautiful daughters. And so I felt like I couldn't grieve the fact that I never had a baby of my own. And what this counselor would say to me is, no, Mary, it's both and. That was crushing. Over and over and over and over again. 16 years times a whole lot. They talk in the trauma world about major life traumas and then death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of trauma. Mm-hmm. And so I had to face that was real. And it was not a disservice to my daughters. I need to say that was horrible, and look what God did.
Mm-hmm. Which is the reality of their adoption stories too. Like it's both and. It's
exactly
so bittersweet, like the loss of a birth family, but then the beauty of an adoptive family. Like I think just so much of our lives are both and. And it's okay to be in that tension. As we come into verses 16 and 18, we just see the Lord moving to this very intimate invitation to us. He says, "In that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband. You will no longer call me my master. I will remove the names of the Baals from her lips. No longer will their names be invoked. In that day, I will make a covenant with them, for them, with the beasts of the field and the birds of the air and the creatures that move along the ground. Bow and sword and battle I will abolish from the land, so that all may lay down in safety." And so here we see that God invites you into deeper intimacy, not obligation. So the Hebrew word for Baal is actually from the word for master. And so what God's essentially saying here is, I don't want to have this master-slave relationship with you that your flesh does, that these false idols and false gods do, the way they consume you and you become slaves to them. I want to invite you into this love-based, intimate, covenantal relationship. And that's different. And it's that kind of love that changes us. And so there's sort of 2 questions I have for you ladies out of this, and you can pick which one you want to answer. The first question would be, what are some false securities and false gods that you've put your trust in, and how has God refined you in turning to him in intimate dependence? Or what does it look like to relate to God as a husband out of a place of love and intimacy, as opposed to a master out of fear or duty?
I like to think that I'm an easygoing person and relaxed and go with the flow. And then I read this question and God was like, you want control, girl. Your false security is you want to control your health and wellness, because I too went, into a deep dive of like, okay, how can I impact our fertility? And I learned like, oh, everything impacts your fertility. And so I began to like overhaul our house and like, okay, no seed oils, organic, grass-fed, everything, like a whole line of supplements and no toxins, and like everything impacts our fertility. And so I began to have a very tight grip on my health and wellness because it's me. I'm the reason that like we're struggling here. And so I began to really blur the lines of like control and surrender, and that has stolen my peace over and over and over again, like you would not believe. And so God has really revealed that to me, and he is, don't get me wrong, he is very much still in present day, like chipping away at my tight grip. And he's starting to ask me to like loosen my grip on everything, because control, I think we all know it, like it's an illusion and we don't have control. We like to think we do, and it feels good when we are controlling, but it's not, we cannot trust in the Lord and also be like, but I got this and I'm gonna make this happen. And on top of that, I would try to control everything and do everything right, and then see like X, Y, and Z person over here getting pregnant, but I'm like, they're literally living off Taco Bell and Pizza Hut. Like, what am I doing wrong? And super frustrating. I'm like, I'm banging my head against the wall, like not eating processed anything, but like ultimately God is the author of life and death. Okay, he is going to open my womb when we are meant to have a biological child. And it's not what I've wanted, but the more that I release that grip and I like literally let his working powerful hand take charge of the driver's seat, he's like, I actually have more peace for you. Like that control and everything you're trying to do, which is extremely exhausting when you're trying to conceive, I don't have that life for you. Even though I'm drawing you into the wilderness, I have peace here. And I want you to. Like, I died on the cross for you to live in peace and live in freedom, and you're not doing that. And so it has been such a refining part of the last 5 years for me is surrendering that. And actually I was in therapy, and my therapist looked at me because I'm like, this isn't my timeline. Like, we were gonna get married, and I've grown my business, and I'm ready to be a mom now, and this is our timeline, and it was perfect. And she's like, Ashton, you are right on time. And I was like, I have never believed that in these 5 years. Like, I always feel behind. Like, all my friends are married and are done having kids, and here we are, we have none. And my timeline isn't perfect. She's like, Ashton, you're right on time. And I've let that wash over me and be a prayer that I'm like, okay, God, like, this is your timeline. I want to follow your timeline, your path. And I didn't even share this in the last 2 services, but I do want to like share, like, God is writing our story, and in December he gave us clarity that we are going to adopt a baby, and that's his timeline for us. And it's so hard when you're in tunnel vision and you're like, I have the perfect plan, and he's like, girl, no, like, there's a baby that's destined to be in your family, and if you got pregnant, you would never be walking into adoption, and that's my story for you. Isn't that so beautiful? It's just so hard to see because he doesn't get, oh, it's so sweet. Yeah, we're very, very excited. And it's like he doesn't always show us the end result. He's asking us to trust. He's asking us to surrender and release control. And he has a better story for us. And so for whatever reason, I was meant to share that in this service. And I totally give him glory because it's not the story I had ever written in my head, but we're following in his path for that. So I know I'm talking too long about that. Sorry, guys.
That trying to grasp for this like false illusion of control just, I think, resonates so strongly with me too. There was a season, started 7.5 years ago when we moved here from the Chicago area, and it probably lasted a year and a half, and it just felt like God was just revealing one thing after another that I had tried to control and like just looked to for these false securities and made false gods in my life. And the first thing was our house, the house that we had bought when we moved here, that we're still living in. We knew it needed some work, but a few hours after closing, we started ripping out the carpet and just quickly realized how bad it was. And a few hours later, our neighbors came over to just share how excited they were to see a dumpster outside, and also to let us know that the previous owner had had 30 cats living inside, and we were literally had a cat pee house. And so instead of moving into the house, we borrowed a camper from my in-laws and moved into the camper in the driveway and just started ripping out anything that could be removed from the house. We removed. And in that process of doing that, it felt like God was also just removing one thing after another and just revealing one, just like an onion, like layer after layer of things that I had looked to for security and comfort. The first was just a house that was the way that I wanted, and neat and organized and beautiful and finished. And in that, I just read over and over again in the Psalms that the Lord is my refuge and the Lord is my shelter, and just pondering that, it just took on such a different meaning to me, like realizing I had looked to all these other things as my refuge, and he was asking to be my refuge and shelter. I think the process of moving away from all our friends, I hadn't moved before. The college that I had gone to literally shared a track with my high school, so it was the first time in my life I was hours away from our community and friends and people that knew me and loved me. And he just revealed to me in that the security I had looked for in that, and also that he was the one that needed to provide those things for me and to fill my heart in that way. Another thing was just my own plans. We had decided right before moving that we were going to try homeschooling for a year, and I had just this kind of idyllic vision of we were going to be creating and exploring and taking nature hikes in the woods every afternoon, and instead we literally drove to Home Depot every afternoon, and it just was not the vision that I had in mind. And then didn't even finish out the school year, but really just kind of crashed and burned. In early May, I was getting ready to head to a trade show in New York, and just the stress of that and the house projects just got too overwhelming for me, and it was just kind of even the sense of failure of not accomplishing what I had wanted, and realizing that I had looked for validation and security in my own accomplishments, and yeah, God speaking to me in that, that his ways are not my ways, and his thoughts are not my thoughts, and his plans not my plans. And then kind of the icing on the cake of that whole season was Jake and I both started just experiencing some kind of crazy health issues, all stress related. And that, for me, just started this deep spiral of fear and anxiety, just realizing how I had made health a false god in my life and looked to that as a place of security that couldn't offer it. And it was in that season of just feeling kind of trapped in the prison of my own anxious thoughts. It felt dark, and I remember just praying and crying out to God one morning, and just asking him, like, would you turn on the lights, just lift me out of this season? And I don't know if it was the same day or weeks later, but I remember being in our kitchen, and I was making food or washing dishes or something, and our son Archer was 3 at the time, and he came in and was like, "Mom, can you turn on the lights in the laundry room for me?" And our laundry room is literally right around the corner from the kitchen, so he didn't need the light on. But I was like, well, I need to wash my hands and then I can. And he's very persistent, so he just grabbed my arm and just dragged me in there with him. I never turned on the lights, but he threw his shirt in the laundry basket and left. And in that moment, I realized he didn't need the lights on. He was just afraid of the dark and needed to know that I was with him. And I just felt God speaking to me in that, just reminding me of what I had prayed earlier of, I don't need him to turn on the lights. I don't need him to change my circumstances. I just needed to know that he was with me, and just him speaking to me in that he was with me, and that was all I needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. I was raised by Stormin Norman, and he made sure that we had the fear of God and all other things in us. And so when I became a believer as a young teenager, that's really how I thought God was. Just kind of like, don't screw up, because he's ready to like give you that word, H-E double toothpicks. And so that was kind of how I thought about God. And then when I was 18, I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., and we went at nighttime to the Lincoln Memorial. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Lincoln's sitting in this big throne, and his hands are kind of hanging over the armrest, and he's a pleasant looking, very tall person. And I was sitting on the steps, and I thought, oh, this is what it's like, me and God, like I'm so close. I'm sitting on the steps here. And I went with that vision for a few years, and then when I was in my early 20s, one day the Lord said to me, you know how you think of me as like, the guy in the chair and you're on the steps? Yeah, no. Actually, see that figurine on your nightstand over there? And I looked, and it was a precious moment. Yes, I'm old. It was a precious moment, and it was a little shepherd holding to his chest a little lamb. And the Lord said to me, that's you, and that's me. And I'm holding you close. I delight in you. I will carry you through things. I will lead you. I don't know if it was this service or the one before when Ashton mentioned Psalm 23, where the Lord leads us. His rod and his staff guide us. He causes us to lay down. Like he is a good shepherd. He's a loving God. And what the book of Hosea reminds us of over and over is that he's just a relentlessly redeeming, loving God. Mm-hmm. And the people of Israel, he just kept coming back for them in different ways. He kept trying to reach to them and remind them of his deep love over and over and over again. And he's doing the same for us still today.
Yeah. So just to wrap it up, we come into verses 19 and 20 that say, I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, in love and compassion. I will betroth you in faithfulness, and you will acknowledge the Lord. The idea is you are betrothed to him forever in security and love. In biblical times, betrothal was a formal promise and legally binding agreement to be married. And it's really significant that this is the language that God uses here, because it's relating to us that even though we are in this dynamic with him, this relationship, this promise, when we are unfaithful, he remains committed. He says, I stay in it with you. And it's so freeing, because it's this reality that it's not about what we do or don't do. It's not even about our ability to remain faithful perfectly to God. It's his character that it's based out of. And he keeps coming after us. It's this restorative kind of love that just, it frees us from this performance-based kind of relationship with God. And we have these deep-seated needs and longings that were actually created by God for God to fill. And these needs are things like emotional connection and intimacy, affection and love, security and safety, feeling seen and appreciated. And I will admit, last service, I had the time wrong that we finished 15 minutes later. I was like, we have so much time, ladies. Let's unpack this together. We did not. I apologize to Kids Zone. But I think the beautiful thing about it is, as the ladies have shared their stories, we see how God has met them in these needs. And it's not even just the needs of a woman's heart. That's, we've kind of gone from that angle for Mother's Day this weekend, but this is just like a human thing. These needs for intimacy and connection and feeling seen. And the reason that we don't have those needs met by people is because God intends to be the only one that can actually fill it. He wants to turn our heart to him so that he can be that fulfillment of them. So just as we're closing today, I just would love for us to each have this space and the humility and vulnerability to ask God to show us where we've been chasing other gods, where we've been running to for comfort that's not God. If it's, other relationships, whether it's your spouse or your kids or your friends, the people that you're turning to before you turn to God. If it's trying to comfort ourselves with food or shopping or screens, whatever it is, for the Lord to just reveal that. But then for him to be able to speak tenderly to your heart, to allure you into the space with him of intimacy where he can be the fulfillment of those, where he draws us away from those false things and just speaks that into us. So if you're in a place today that you are in that valley, I just encourage you to ask God to show you that door of hope, to be able to speak that peace of his presence into you. And if you're in a place of wilderness, whether it's the wilderness of motherhood, the wilderness of infertility, the wilderness of just challenging seasons, to just accept the invitation that the Lord is extending to draw away with him, to hear his love being spoken over you, to feel that tender heart that he has towards you in that, and just see it as this sort of invitation into the holy wild and this adventure to know him deeper and more intimate. So we just pray that over you today, and we'll just wrap it up, and I'll pray, and we'll go on. So, Lord, we thank you today so much for even just the crazy story of Hosea and what it means to our relationship with you, God, that you are a faithful, faithful God that sticks to your promises. You are a God of integrity and constant faithfulness. God, even when we come up short, your love is big enough to cover over our lacking, and you just do it time and time again. And I just pray today that people feel that tender love of your heart for them, God. If they're in a season where they just need to hear your voice, will you just speak to them, God? Will you encourage them? Will you show them the door of hope? And even if it's not ending the season in their timing, God, that you are just growing fruit in them in that season, and that they're able to just sort of see the wilderness differently, that it's not this desolate place, God, but it's actually full of your presence and your invitation. And so we just ask for that today. And again, we just thank you for your faithful covenantal love with us. And we pray all these things in your name. Amen. Have a good rest of your day.